So, like, is it true? Because I seen on Aliens that in England you have to take tea breaks. Is that true?
I've worked with James Cameron a couple of times, and I can see how someone like that would be infuriated.
I think the whole English tea thing has been blown out of all perspective.
Look, first of all, the stagecraft and the craftsmanship in general that the English did for this movie was second to none. And these guys are great craftsmen, and they take their work seriously. And but I think the pace of the way the work is done is much more laid back. I mean, there's a tea break at 10 o'clock, and then there's a long lunch, and most of the crew end up going to the pub. That's actually, can you imagine a studio lot here with a bar? Do they have those? I don't think so. You know, and then you'd come back, and then you'd shoot for a few hours, and then you'd have a tea break at 4, and it just was a very kind of laid back, kind of traditional way of making a film. Nothing wrong with it, but there was a tremendous time constraint and budget constraints to make this movie, you know, work. So Jim, you know, was pressed to just squeeze every moment he could to get another shot.
Well, Aliens was made a long time ago. Aliens was made when the hierarchical structure of filmmaking in England as a union-run endeavor was at its most profound, and you had to stop every 3 hours for a 15-minute break, every 6 hours for a lunch break. So when I started out in England, and I did a couple of studio films, Nightbreed, Hellbound Part 2, Getting It Right, those films at the 3 hour mark, everything would come to a stop. All of the technicians would put their tools down, and a little lady pushing a cart with tea and donuts on it would turn up, and there'd be a long line as everyone got their tea and donuts from her. And in 15 minutes, everyone would drift back to work again. And it would stop. It would stop mid-scene, mid-dialogue. You know, if the actress or actor had dialogue, it, you know, didn't matter. It would stop. And the same at the lunchtime, and then in the afternoon. And woe, you know, bad on you if you thought you were going to push through that. Absolutely. And I've worked with James Cameron a couple of times, and I can see how someone like that would be infuriated by that mentality. But I don't think it exists. Certainly, I've been back and shot 5 movies in England, you know, fairly recently, and it doesn't exist anymore. They're a competitive indie filmmaking community, just like any other. You know, Budapest, Italy, they're all the same. You know, it's about making great movies, and you obviously have to negotiate with your crew if you're going to go into lunch, and you know, whether it's meal penalties or a discussion, you know, involving money, which is fine. It's completely fair. You know, they're human beings. But it's not a rigid structure where it just stops, you know, which is what it did back in the 80s and early 90s and prior to that. You know, it was, you know, you read books by Raoul Walsh or Howard Hawks or Houston, and it was the same for them. They, you know, the moment the unions became too strong, the filmmaking became very difficult, very expensive. You're paying for things that don't end up on the screen. You know, there's a fine line between making something safe and having someone qualified drive a truck and hiring 6 drivers that do nothing but eat donuts because your film has a budget, you know, of a certain figure. I just, you know, it is what it is. It's you know, it's infuriating when you try and, you know, a film is a film. It's a, you know, a different format for something that costs less than $1 million to something that costs $5 million to something that costs $20 million. You know, the movies require very, very different structures and very different formats to make them work, and it can be infuriating when you're in an environment. If you're an artist who's desperate to make the best possible film and get bleed every bit of energy and art, you know, and performance out of your dollar, and then you're faced with this immovable force that says, no, you cannot do it this way. You have to do it this way because these guys demand payment, you know?
Yeah. No, I can dig that, man.
What's your name?
Elizabeth.
I like to know the names of the people.